Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. En el nombre de Allah, el Benéfico, el Misericordioso. I bear witness there is no God but Allah, who came in the person of Master Fard Muhammad. And I bear witness that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is absolutely, without a doubt, the exalted Christ. And I thank them both for preparing one for us today to lead, teach, and guide us in this hour of darkness, to shine as a light of guidance, a beacon of hope, and an absolute warrior for the truth, to bring freedom, justice, and equality to all of the people of the earth. We greet you in their names this evening in the greeting words of peace, which we say in the Arabic language. Assalamu alaikum, que significa en español la paz sea con usted o la paz esté contigo. And in English, it means peace be unto you. I'm Student Minister Abel Muhammad, representative to the Latino community, quote unquote Latino community, for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in the Nation of Islam. And it is a great honor to have you join us again this evening on our Nuestra NOI platform here on the Closing the Gap Broadcast Network, where we're honored today to have you join us. We thank you. And we have a very, very, very special program this evening. We're going to get into it in just a few minutes here. But before we begin, I wanted to read a quick passage from this absolutely monumental book by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, entitled Message to the Black Man in America, wherein on page 54 and 55, in a section entitled A Good Name is Better Than Gold, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is speaking on the fact that names tell you something about a culture of people, tells you something about their lineage, tells you something about who they are. And he explains how a name like, for example, Sam Jones is not the name of the Aboriginal people of the earth. And we can say the same. Hernandez, Rodriguez, Torres, Perez, these are not the native Aboriginal indigenous names of our people. And he says on page 55 here, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad writes, "My poor blind, deaf, and dumb people are going by the wrong names. And until you accept the truth of your true identity and accept the names of your people and nation, we will never be respected because of this alone. This is one of the reasons Almighty Allah has come among us. This is one of the reasons Almighty Allah has come among us, that is, to give us His names, the most holy and righteous names of the planet Earth." He went on and said earlier on page 54, "One of the first and most important truths that must be established in this day is our identity. Our names, brothers and sisters, that we've been wearing are not our names. They are the names of the Spaniards who came, the Portuguese who came, the English who came, Europeans who came and tried to erase our history, try to disconnect us from our true root and vine. They did not want us to know who we truly are, but we thank Almighty God, Allah, today that a message has come, that a man was raised, that men have been given to lead you and I, teach you and I who and what we really are." So we have a very, very special program today in that line, because our identity is absolutely tied to our names and how we are called and how we identify ourselves. And we have the blessing of having with us today a brother who's second generation, if you will, Black Muslim, but Mexican, born from believing parents, born from a pioneer, so-called Latino, Black Muslim. And we have some beautiful history to share with you, some beautiful images, some beautiful mail even. Letter from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad And I am just excited. I don't want to hold it back any longer. And it's a great honor that I'm going to bring on next here our brother who is going to be our host this evening, my dear brother and our student captain out of Muhammad Mosque #3 in Milwaukee. And he's in Milwaukee by way of Madison, by way of roots in New York, as almost all Puerto Ricans have, from Boricua roots as well. But an absolutely beautiful brother who I've known for over 2 decades now, and who I love dearly. It's an honor to bring on and please welcome our brother, student captain David Muhammad, to our program. Brother David, the show's in your hands.
Praise due to Allah. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
We always want to start in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, who indeed appeared and came to us in the person of Master Farad Muhammad. We thank Almighty God Allah for raising up in our midst the eternal leader of the nation of Islam, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And we thank Almighty God Allah and His exalted Christ for the man who is in our midst, who is the extension of Allah's grace and mercy among us, and who is the Messiah in our midst, if you understand correctly, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And so it's in those holy and righteous names we want to greet all of the viewers tonight, all of those who are watching via the various methods and platforms that are out there. In the greeting words of peace, we said in Arabic, Assalamu alaikum. I'm very honored tonight because of the brother who we are conducting an interview with, and we are titling tonight's program A Legacy of Faith. And when we say legacy of faith, many of us who have come into the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad from the Spanish-speaking community, we saw something in the struggle of Black people in the wilderness of North America that helped us greater understand God's hand in the redemption of us as a suffering people as well. But it is a very special message for many of us who have come into the teachings. We didn't know necessarily how many in the nation or this city or that city had a Spanish-speaking believer. And then when you go into our history and you see that Master Farad Muhammad did indeed guide the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he says this in Message to the Black Man, that one day soon we will make an attempt to unite all of the originals under the banner of Islam in the Western Hemisphere. And that indeed he did. Proof of that we have tonight with our beloved brother who, as our student minister Abel Muhammad said, is a second generation follower of the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad under the guidance of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And he's just a wonderful, wonderful brother. His name is Brother Manuel Ali Rashid, who comes to us from West Point, from the mighty West Coast, Muhammad Mosque #27 in Los Angeles. And he has so much to share tonight, but I have to give him a proper introduction. This is a brother who is a helper in the community. He works in the community with our brothers and sisters in what people would call the Black and the Brown community. He is a dedicated soldier for Muhammad, and he has a testimony that I'm very eager to have him share with you all. And I think it's important because I have a little bit of testimony with this brother as well. And I think it's a good starting point for us. Those who know me and some of my work know that I have an inclination towards the history of the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as they relate to the so-called Latino. And there is a picture that really shows and encapsulates the history of Islam in the Latino community. And the roots of Islam in the Latino community are the same as the spread of Islam in the Black American community, and that is through the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. This was a photo at a Savior's Day in the early 70s. And in this photo are many of the pioneer Muslims. And when we did a workshop at our Savior's Day convention, for those who are familiar, Savior's Day is the annual gathering in commemoration of the birth of Master Farad Muhammad. And when we were presenting on some of this history, we had a PowerPoint presentation, and some of the images were clipped a little bit. And my brother was in the audience, and I shared the picture with him via email because his father is in the picture. And tonight we're going to talk about his father and how he came to Islam We're going to talk about his own journey, Brother Manuel Ali Rashid's journey in Islam. But we wanted to share this as a starting point because Islam, it really is that which unifies. And it is this teaching that has brought the knowledge of self to our people. And if you can see in the upper, I guess that would be the right-hand corner, that is Brother Manuel Ali Rashid's father. That is Brother Henry. And so we want to hear a little bit about Brother Henry, and we want to hear a little bit about how you got your name. We'll start with there because they say a good name is better than gold. And my brother, you have a wonderful name. Matter of fact, one of the people who is at the root of your name is actually in this picture as well. So I was hopeful that you would talk about the individuals who made an impact on your father for him to name you how he named you. We'll use that as a starting point.
Absolutely, my brother. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, family. So the history of my name, my full name is Manuel Ali Rashid. And Manuel was the minister who's in that picture, in the center of the picture, with the FOI hat in the back. He had a really close relationship with my father in the early 70s, late 60s. And when I came around in 1976, my father named me Manuel as sort of a connection to my biological family, which was because my mother wanted a Manuel in every generation, but also because he had such a close tie with the minister at the time. Then my name Ali Rashid is actually tied into the captain at Mosque 27, who's a legendary captain. He was Brother Edward 9X, I believe, and then soon was given the name Ali Rashid. Brother Preston shared this picture with me because I had never seen a picture of the brother. I just had heard of the legacy that he left behind to this day. And yeah, those are the names that I've been given since birth. So you could just imagine the reaction people get when they read my full name. But it has significance, and it's something that was embedded in me from a young age. You know, any follower of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we're steadfast and strong and living up to your attributes that were given to you. So you have to earn them, brother. And, you know, I was given these names, but at the same time, I'm striving to live up to them, sir.
All praises due to Allah. And thank you for that history. Thank you. And I want to thank Allah for the photos that we have to share tonight with you all to document some of this. Let's start with your father's background and your family's history. What nationality was your father? Where was his background from? And give a little bit of his history.
Yes, sir. My mother is first generation from Mexico. My father is third generation from what we consider to be Mexico. So they both are from quote unquote Mexican background. And my father was actually born in Arizona. He was born in Jerome, Arizona, to Rita Hernandez and Miguel Hernandez. And they are also tied to the Yaqui tribe, I believe, in Arizona. So that's a little bit of his background. They then moved to East Los Angeles. They live right near Hazard Park and Brooklyn and Hazard in East Los Angeles. That's where most of his upbringing was until they later on moved into South Los Angeles, right off of Slauson and Bonsayo. So that's a little bit of his history.
Well, let's dig a little bit into that. How did your father
Yes,
get introduced? And I'm glad we're talking some geography. One of the reasons I wanted to start with that picture, because many of us who know some of the history, we tend to start everything Latino on the East Coast and not necessarily lift up the West Coast. But one of the reasons I thought it was so just beautiful, your history and your name, is because it unveils a lot of the history of Islam on the West Coast. And for those who are familiar with the pioneers of the Nation of Islam, we mentioned obviously the former Western Regional Captain Ali Rashid, but also people like Abdul Wazir Muhammad and
Hmm.
others who were around in that era. How did your father, who introduced your father to the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad? Do you know how he became acquainted with the teachings?
I think it was just through reading and research. He always told me that nothing was so impactful in his life um, than the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I think he came across the teachings when he was incarcerated. He served time in Folsom, Soledad, Trinidad. Uh, I'm sorry, not Trinidad, uh, St. Quentin, and there he started studying, and he heard the message of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he was invited out to. Who invited him out? I am not quite sure, brother, but once he heard it, he always tied it into Roberta Flack's song, "Killing Me Softly," because he said that when he heard the messenger teach, it was speaking to him as it was he was having an individual conversation with them, and that was the birth of it. Since then, you fell in love with the messenger, sir.
So we're looking at something on the screen. I hope you can see it. For those who are viewing us, I want you to explain what it is we're looking at with this letter. I see the signature. It is the signature of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. What is this letter that we're seeing here?
Yes, sir. That's actually a response to my father sending an intent to join the Nation of Islam. So the messenger sent this letter back, inviting him out to his local mosque once he was released. So this is a letter. I searched high and low for this, brother, and I finally came across it because I know he had saved it along with other correspondence that he received from the secretary at the time. But that's what this letter reflects, sir.
And this is in 1968?
Yes, sir. May 26, 1968.
And so, and for those who can't read it, go ahead and we have some other documents that show this. Tell me a little bit about the story. Tell everybody, share some of what else we're looking at here. But please, you get a letter like that while you're in the belly of the beast. You come home, and we know, and you know from your professional work, and we want to talk about that tonight too.
Yes, sir.
Reentry is a hard thing, and you have to come
Absolutely.
into a strong environment to keep you strong when you return home like that. Share with us just a little bit of the history that you have blessed us with tonight. What's on the screen, these other letters, and then his process. What was it like? Did he share those stories with you when he came to the temple with that type of, with the wind at his sails, with a letter from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to come in and fall into the ranks of Muhammad?
Yes, sir. So the other two letters are the process that we go through as far as becoming a registered Muslim. So one of them, I guess, was sent to him once his letter was accepted, and found and went through the vetting by the labors of Mosque number 2 for him to get his X. Then the one to the right is actually when he received his X, and at which time he became Henry 17X. So I have other documentation that also, like if you look at the top portion of it, it actually, on the one on the right side, the top portion is actually a cutout of one of our Supreme Wisdom questions. So he received a lot of them like that he had to read and memorize in order to go through the student enrollment and everything else. So these were letters that he was receiving in response to what he was, how he was corresponding with Chicago. And I pointed this one out. I sent this one in because I think this is what gave him his name and his identity as Henry 17X in the Nation of Islam. And he was very proud of that. He held steadfast to his belief, and I'm pretty sure he still does, brother.
Praise be to Allah. Tell us. So I want to make this as personal as possible. Tell
Yes,
us a
sir.
little bit about some of the stories he shared with you about that time, what the temple was like, how, how we were received in the ranks, and some of the work that he did, what any assignments or any things, any posts that he held, or any of the guidance that he received upon coming into the mosque that made his faith so strong.
Yes, sir. Um, if I may take a step further back
Sure.
to when he was in St. Quentin.
Okay.
And I shared a photo of him outside of St. Quentin because he actually took me up there once I became an adult. And he took a picture of me outside of St. Quentin because he said that he found the messenger's teaching inside of St. Quentin. And that's going to make sure that I never touch the belly of the beast. I start there because when he was in St. Quentin, he had his own battles to fight as far as declaring himself as a Muslim. He walked around with a target on his back, and people trying to like either have him take his life or people trying to take his life. When this happened, it just made him stronger. He would tell me stories, brother, of they would put him in the hole because he was a believer in the messenger of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, and they would hand him trays with razor blades underneath, hoping that he would just go nuts and kill himself. I had other people vet stories that he would tell me, and he would say it jokingly because anyone who knew my father, they knew he was really quiet, and he wasn't like he just when he spoke, he said something that had a substance to it, but he was a really quiet person in general. And he would tell me stories, of when he was locked up, and it would always make me question, like, is he like exaggerating what's happening, or like what was happening at the time, or what was going on? And I actually ran into people who were locked up with them, and they vetted all the stories. One of the brothers that I used to catch a bus with to go to school asked me, he goes, "Are you Henry's son?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, whatever that man teaches you, however he guides you, you listen to what he says. He goes, "I don't know how he did it. I don't know who protected him. But when we're in St. Quentin together, he was the only man I know that had a hit on him, and he came out alive."
Oh, wow.
So I came back home that evening. I had that conversation with my father, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him, I go, "Dad, like, what's going on? Like, what actually happened?" Because I came along like 20 years later. And he smirked because he had this like little smirk to him, right? And he said, "Allahu Akbar." And then I like, "But Dad, what happened?" He said, "They had a hit on me and they never did it because they always said I was with someone." He said, "But I was always alone." So I was like, all right. That in my head was like, well, Allah was with you, so what else do you need? Right. So that was one of the struggles that he went through. Um, Once he came out, you know, it's something that a conversation, a dialogue that us as so-called Latinos in the Nation of Islam many times have to have, that the presence of someone other than a quote unquote Black Muslim may go through challenges different than one who is Black. But yet, if you know the teachings and you know how to apply them, you actually know that we are part of the Black family. So, the original nation. So he always understood that, brother. So I think that, along with Minister Wazir Muhammad, who they're very close friends, brother. Like they were so close. Like they're inseparable. That's all I remember from growing up.
Can
Go
you?
ahead, brother.
So we have to go there, brother. And I'm so happy that you, because I wasn't sure if I knew that there had to be some connection, because for those who are unaware, Brother Abdul Wazir Muhammad, former You know, that he laid a serious foundation for Islam on the West Coast. And he apparently, from what we were taught, he grew up in East Los Angeles.
Yes, sir.
So tell us a little bit about Brother Minister Abdul Wazir and his relationship with your father and his relationship in the work of teaching and training and unifying the black and the brown.
Yes, sir. Minister Wazir Muhammad had a really close relationship with my family. As a matter of fact, I smirked a little bit because when I brought him up, I remember finding my father's black book after he transitioned, and I opened, and the only name he had in there was Wazir Muhammad. But it's Minister Wazir Muhammad grew up in the projects in East Los Angeles, so he had a very close relationship with the so-called Brown family. He always pushed my father and myself to be a better representative or a strong representative for our community. And he always made sure that whatever he did, he kept the teachings up front about the messenger's teachings and how we fit in. That's a beautiful picture. I sent that one in because the button on it, he carried all the time. It says, "I love Farrakhan." But yeah, Minister Wazir Muhammad, to this day, I have brothers come up to me and tell me how he always pushed for the so-called Latino to be part of our mission, and that's because he was so fond of that relationship that he had coming from East LA. I think he even went to Roosevelt High School in East Los. That's one of Boyle Heights. They would get upset if I say East LA. But yeah, that's the tie he had. My father and him always supported one another. They always looked out for one another. Whenever someone was in need, I knew he could always call him Minister Wazir. As a matter of fact, when my father's transition, I was a little bit lost, brother. I didn't know how to go about it, what to do. So the one I reached out to is Minister Wazir, and then he connected me with Minister Tony at the time, and then he showed me everything I had to do. And it's another thing that caused some kind of curiosity for me is that Minister Wazir knew my name. He knew my name was Manuel Ali Rashid, but he always called me Brother David. Whoa. And I always wondered why. Yeah, brother. He and I would always be like, why is he calling me David? He knows my name, but he would always call me Brother David. So I have to study a little bit more on why that was, but it was always interesting to me because obviously he saw something in me that also gave me that name, right? And he was such a wise man. Like I was around with him being at Mosque 27 in the 80s, then the 90s, and then he became the humanitarian minister. Yeah, I remember all those, brother. Even though some of it, when I was younger, my memory may be vague, but I could never forget Minister Wazir. And in my journey to Islam, what caused me to fall back into the ranks was Minister Wazir, because I had that conversation with him at my father's janazah, and he told me, when are you going to fall back into the ranks? And I had never, the Islam was in me. It's like, there's no avoiding it. Like, it's not going anywhere. But I wasn't active like I am now. So I promised them that I was going to get myself right and fall back in. And then he transitioned. I heard about it and I was disappointed. So that I didn't keep that. So me coming back into the ranks was actually me keeping my word, to making my word bond, sir, to Minister Abdul Wazir Muhammad.
Allahu Akbar.
Yes,
dear
sir.
brother, we're going into your coming into and accepting Islam for yourself. And many of us who have come in young or heard this teachings, or our parents are in the mosque or into the teachings and raise us with it, sometimes there's a departure point between what they gave us, what they instilled in us, and our own path. Talk a little bit about what it was like growing up in the household of Muslims. Your mother, we want to hear about her as well. I believe it's Sister Anna or Anna.
Hmm.
Uh,
Anna.
if you could tell us about her and about um, how you were raised and how that came really, like you just were sharing, how that brought you back into faith for yourself and how they reacted to your own journey.
Yes, sir. Um, my father took a very interesting way of introducing me to Islam, sir. He would tell me that when my mother was pregnant with me, he would recite surahs of the Quran to me. When I was born, he of course gave me the name Manuel Ali Rashid, which when broken down mean the greatest, guide to the right path. And then we circle back to Emmanuel, which is presence of God. So the greatest guide to the right path because Allah is present. So that was always embedded in me, and like it was something that he taught me from a young man, but he never pushed the teachings on me. So it wasn't until I would say I was probably like 8 or 9 years old and I could comprehend that the understanding of theology and the understanding of a lifestyle and the understanding of Islam, that he invited me and he took me to the mosque and he said, "This is my faith and my belief. Yes, you are named Manuel Ali Rashid, but you have to make your own choice. So you tell me what you feel after you're introduced to this." I was already set up, brother. Like that was all I knew. So, but the nuance that he actually gave me a choice to make was the most beautiful part about my journey. That he empowered me to be the one that makes the choice of being a Muslim. Even though I had the name, he told me it was up to me. And I remember that, and I was a small child growing up in a household that, I mean, you couldn't say nothing about the messenger in front of my father because, the first dispensation knows that it was on. You said anything about the messenger, it was on. Um, but I grew that love for the messenger. And it's so much so, brother, that when I was in lectures as an adult, yeah, my Jesus feast.
Beautiful.
I shared with you, brother, what I
Yes,
would
sir.
tell people. Being Mexicano and growing up in West Point and close to Mexico,
Yes,
a
sir.
lot of my Mexican family would ask me, "Well, you're Muslim, but growing up, did you have a picture of Jesus on your wall?" And I said, "Absolutely."
That's right.
And there's a picture. That always been in me, and that drawing, I so want to get my hands on it again, like that painting.
Yes, sir.
Um, I'm not sure what happened to it, but if I can, I'll replicate it just to have on my wall. And that was what I grew up with. That was what I had on my wall. That was what was instilled in me from a young man. Um, my father taught me the lessons. He would have me recite the prayer in Arabic as a young man to learn it in Arabic. He would have me learn the lessons. I didn't know. It was like a Mr. Miyagi kind of thing. Like he was giving me all this stuff, and I
So,
was like, "Okay, I'll do it. I'll do it, pops." And it was like, "Okay, did you do your prayer today? Did you study your prayer? Did you do like, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir." And my mom, man, bless her soul, she was she was an MGT
mm,
without being an MGT. What I mean by that is that she gave my father that that love and that solidarity and belief without knowing much about it,
mhm.
except when my father was telling her about it. And she just, it's like the messenger blessed him with a beautiful wife because she just fell in, and you know they they remained married to to the end. Like they nothing would separate them. And my mom would always call me Rashid, you know,
Mm.
and people would look and be like, Rashid, like, pero es mexicano, like, you know, yeah, pero se llama Rashid, like, you know,
Mhm.
so that opened up conversations.
Mm.
But yeah, brother, it's like I could go on for hours just about how my father was really meticulous and really strategic on how he embedded Islam into me. Like,
But
you
keep
know,
as these things come up in your mind, brother, while we having this conversation, please share,
yes,
because
sir.
it's doing so much for people who are watching, some who may have never heard the history, and then those who
Yes, sir.
might not really have that level of understanding. We had some comments in the chat. I think I saw a comment from Brother Abraham Sharif, who soldiered with your father, and then
Praise be to Allah.
Sister Mecca Islam, and others. Wonderful family who are really just enjoying what you're saying, brother, because um, you're really giving us a good example of how your father did it. And for many of us who are parents in Islam, we struggle with this. And, the Bible talks
Mm.
about raise a child, train a child up in the way that they should go, and they will not depart. It didn't say they wouldn't deviate, it didn't say they wouldn't bump their head, but
Hmm.
that eventually all roads lead to home. And
Yes,
so
sir.
and then there's another piece that I think is valuable, because what your father clearly did was he taught Islam to the heart. He
Yes,
taught it
sir.
to your heart in a way that made you love it. Give just some of those memorable experiences with him, and then we want to hear about you and your journey and how his example impacted you. We have more pictures to share, because one of the most beautiful things about you, and I have to, we could celebrate each other, right? You're a
Yes,
bridge
sir.
between the era of the the prior to 1975 first term
Yes, sir.
rise of the Nation of Islam, but also you grew up during the rebuilding of the Nation of Islam on the West Coast. So we,
Absolutely.
we want to hear your childhood memories, brother, because Allah made you a witness of the resurrection of the flag of Islam on the West. So
Yes,
please
sir.
share more with us, brother.
Yes, sir. Um, those were very memorable. I didn't know the magnitude of what was going on because I was so young, but just being around Minister Farrakhan during the early 80s when he was rebuilding, so-called rebuilding the Nation of Islam was like, is very impactful on me today. I was blessed and honored to see the minister a couple of years ago out here in Long Beach. And I got home and I was so happy because the E team has sent me a picture of me interacting with them. Um, so I got home and my mom was like, "Why are you so excited?" Because I took care of my mother in her older years. And I got to see the minister today. And then she goes, "Oh, how beautiful. He's seen you when you were a baby and he got to meet you as you're an adult." I'm like, "What?" I had totally like blanked out from when I met him when I was a young child. But another close friend of my father, brother Shahid, um,
Praise be to Allah.
he shared that the minister had mentioned that when they got into the elevator, that he had mentioned like I think I remember the brother. I remember the brother when he was a baby, and I was like, wow, like that just vetted what my mom had just told me, and it made me like you always question, brother, are you on the right path?
Right.
Are you doing the right things? And that, along with meeting you, brother, at my first Savior's Day back, I had just arrived by myself to the hotel. As I went into the lobby, you're sitting to the side and we greeted each other and you introduced yourself, brother. So I want to thank you for that moment too, because it once again like solidified that I was doing what I needed to do and where I was at, along with the picture that you shared with me. But going back to the early 80s, those days, man, growing up with like Mr. Um, Abdul Khalid Muhammad,
Yeah, I'm about to say
you
you
know?
you were a child when Khaled was the minister on the West Coast, brother. And I think
Yes,
we're
sir.
doing this interview. I think today's the anniversary of his birth. You have any
Yes,
childhood
sir.
memories of those years and whatnot?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I remember holding posts for him at Long Beach State. I remember being at many of these speeches. There's even more history that we could get into and delve into, of like even when um, the attempted assassination by James Best at the time, like even that history I remember because he was actually present the day before at the Vision Theater in Leimert Park,
Mm.
and I got to meet him that day.
Okay.
And not knowing what he had in mind, you
Sure.
know. So there's a lot of history that I remember now, and I'm like, wow, I lived that, you
So in
know.
the early 80s, you have some, and I think we saw one of the pictures of the mosque at that time with the star and crescent,
Yes,
and
sir.
then some of the other, I would say luminaries of
Yes,
Islam.
sir.
Um, wow, look at that. Any you have any
So
memories of what it was? Go ahead.
a little bit history of that. I'm sorry, brother. I didn't mean to cut you
No, no,
off.
no, please. This is about
Um,
you.
but a lot of people may not know that picture is actually on Crenshaw and Stalker.
Mhm.
And that mosque was Mosque 27, and it sat where the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza is now. And that's when I was always asking people if they had a very close friend and brother of mine as well, brother Limio Muhammad in the West Coast, which was really close to my father as well. I would always ask him for pictures and videos and stuff like that, and we couldn't get a hold of any. And then as I was going through my father's things when my mother transitioned, I found this picture, and that I remember skateboarding along the front of the mosque, like during FY class, and like when I like it was a men were in there, and I was outside doing my thing, and I always tell Captain Halim this story. When I was little, my my father took me to the mosque, and he tells me, "Mijo, go ahead, take in the knowledge. I'll be back. I'm gonna go fishing with the brothers." And I was so naive that I understand that fishing meant going out for new guests. I thought that he was going fishing with the FOI. And I was like, wait a minute, you just gonna leave me here at the mosque and you're gonna go fishing without me? And I say that story because it was just like me as a child, in the innocence of a child, not really understanding the magnitude of what was going on.
Mm.
Like not understanding the magnitude that this nation of Islam was going to rise to never fall again.
Beautiful.
And the minister was doing the work at that time that others were not like predisposed to do that. They didn't know how to go about it. And just seeing those speeches and like the photo that he shared, that was shared with the Star and Crescent, that was our flag that was in Mosque 27. It was a two-story building, and my father would take pictures from the top down, and there was a minister speaking, and I believe on one of them is Abdul Khalid Muhammad holding post.
We see that. That's
So
right there. Yes, sir.
yeah, and I remember that who would survive the battle of Armageddon, Christianity or Islam, and all that all the time. And yeah, brother, it's like it was beautiful times. um it was times that I always go back to, and I'm like, you know if I would relive those moments with the knowledge that I have of the Nation of Islam now, how I would like actually like I share this because you referenced my career, brother, and I'm a marriage and family therapist, right?
Yes, sir.
And a major part of it is journaling.
Mm.
For I would have journaled so much about this time to capture the moment and how it was transpiring to what we are now, you know. And being a Muslim as an adult, I just thank Allah that I'm still around to see it. And I thank Allah for the messenger and the minister for what they've done for Islam,
Praise
you
be to
know.
Allah. And we want
So
to.
yes,
We have a question I think is valuable for us to lift up in this conversation. And then also, we also want to encourage those who are viewing this broadcast, support the CTG Closing the Gap broadcast with a Cash App donation at CTG broadcast. And there's other ways you can do it via PayPal. It's on the lower part of the screen. But we want to make sure that we're able to chronicle and document our own history and share this with our people in ways that will inspire faith and belief. And so, as our brother in the comment, brother Michael J. Muhammad, he's giving you the greetings. ASA, brother Rashid, how can we help more to bring more the teachings to more of the so-called Latino community when most of us speak very little Spanish in the ranks? Talk about that issue. Yes, it always comes up. We're taught that we will not be successful unless we speak well. How has it worked in what you have witnessed and experienced about the outreach efforts to the Latino community, and how can those who don't speak Spanish aid in the outreach and recruitment and fishing, as you mentioned, of new believers into the ranks of Muhammad?
Yes, sir. So, alaikum salam, brother Michael. Beautiful brother, man. So how to aid in reaching the Latino community when very little of us speak Spanish? If we break that down, brother, most of the generations, they depend on the younger generation to translate for them, period. So, engaging the youth would also engage the adults when there's that communication or language barrier, right? And I say that, brother, because it's actually been told to me, not like unknowingly to the person who was expressing it to me. And I'll give you the example, brother. I was in a session one day, and I'm not going to share the details or anything like that, but someone expressed, I received a newspaper that talked about the vaccines and stuff like that. And I said, oh, interesting. And they said, well, I couldn't read it. I said, all right. I go, so why are you bringing it up? Like, what's, she goes, well, it was important to me because it had a little trumpet in the front. And I had my son read it to me and gave me a lot of good information about what to do during the virus. I said, the coronavirus epidemic and pandemic. And I said, okay. I said, in my head, I'm like, I know the brothers were pushing in that area that time, right? So I was like, okay. I said, so how were you able to get that information? And they go, well, my boy read it to me. He goes, but I have more questions. I'm like, I may be able to answer those questions, but let's stay on that, right? Mm-hmm. So we already, as Latinos, depend on our youth to be the translators with other people, like whether it be the bill collector, whether it be our employer, whoever it may be, we depend on that. So we can actually tap into our youth as Muslims and do more outreach to our youth and expose them to the teachings through their children, which is what happened in this situation, right? Like they're exposed unknowingly and unbeknownst to them to the most honorable Elijah Muhammad's teachings through their children, because I guarantee the child was probably like, what is this? It was a newspaper that was left on my counter, and now on my door, and now my mom wants to know about it. So they're going to look a little bit deeper into it. So we have to find unconventional ways of engaging youth and adults. And also, I've been asked this question lately a lot about Spanish speaking, because the brothers go out here in the West Coast a lot with the Final Call newspaper. And I'm going to start asking the minister and the captain out here if I could start a Spanish class. Like I don't speak perfect Spanish, but I can at least speak enough to convey the message to our people, and they're intrigued as is, just because we stand out and we have to speak the people's language. That's right. And just by our nature, our welcoming nature, and the way we're taught to engage people, right, that alone calls to our nature, and it calls for us to be connected to the people.
Dear brother, if check this out, and I just want to throw this in there because I think it might inspire some more from yourself. Then you talk about the nature and the welcoming nature.
Yes, sir.
And there's a natural attraction with us and how we interact with people, that we are unalike in how we engage. and what people may have in terms of misconceptions about Black people in America and how they interact with each other. And so there might be divisions or whatnot. And then on the West Coast, there's so much that has happened between Black and brown. The the way of Muslims to bridge that gap. And then you also bring up a real wonderful point. We're talking about a people whose nature, I don't care what our condition is as so-called Latinos, is family oriented, is welcoming, and it looks for the God in others. And when it sees authenticity, it responds in a reciprocal nature. Share some more about your experiences for the brothers and sisters who might be like where I am in the central region, who might not have necessarily as much exposure, or others, or in other cities who like my brother said, we're looking at ways to do more of this. And it's beautiful you talk about teaching a Spanish class, because
Yes,
there's
sir.
a great desire to learn and assist in this work. Share just some of the experiences you all have in the outreach efforts.
Yes, sir. Um, I'm gonna share something that happened not too long ago. You know, our first officer out here and Captain William, student Captain William out here, they run outreach with gangs and community services, right?
Yes, sir.
So right before the holidays, my profession, I try to increase social interactions with our youth. So I use resources that I have, but them being exposed, and these are so-called Latino youth, they were exposed to FOI outside of uniform, outside of the bow tie and suit, and just the way they were embraced and they're recognized just for being there drew them in, where they started asking me questions, right? And of course, I had to have a clear boundary of what was going on, but I was answering the questions.
Mm.
So those kind of interactions, like you mentioned, call to the nature of self, right? And for our youth, I think it's very important that we foster that and we show them that as an FOI or as an MGT, we're still human, but we're once where you're at. And we evolved to this, so it's possible. What is going to be your journey? You know, those interactions help my work in the community, help me stay grounded to the community, even though I may not be out doing much like outreach for like what would I say, like for my job during the pandemic. Just exposure like during that for a little short duration of time sparks a thought, and they then start questioning, you know, like, why are you guys greeting each other with peace? Like, what does that mean? I heard you guys say assalamu alaikum. And then you translate it, right? You translate it to either Spanish or English or whatever they want to know. So my community outreach is that, is exposure. Like they ask me a lot of times, I'm asked like, what do people think when they know that they find out that you're Muslim? And I said, by the time they find out, it's too late. And they're like, what? I go, by the time they find out, I've broken every stereotype and every misconception that they have of a Muslim, that they have nothing but to embrace, like whatever Ali is doing, like, okay, like, and it's like, and all praises due to Allah, because it's not me. It's what Allah has blessed me with to engage others with, you know,
While we
and
were
that's what I
talking,
think.
go ahead,
Yes,
go
sir.
finish.
No, go ahead, brother.
Well, they flashed this picture, so we're gonna go back to it if it's possible,
Okay.
because back to your childhood briefly, because you really do stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yes,
And
sir.
there was another picture that they showed with Brother Sabir, or
Yes,
as
sir.
he's known in the martial arts world, Brother Stephen Muhammad.
Yes, sir.
And why don't you tell us just a little bit about, like you mentioned, Captain Shahid and some of the others who helped make an impact on you and your development.
Yes, sir. I hope that brother Jabbar, who's now in Atlanta, I hope he's looking at this too, because I'm gonna point him out. And like Joe, like they I wanna come clear, brother, in bullying. Like they bullied me when I was little. No, I'm just kidding. I always tease them about that. But no, you have to stay always like alert. They made me live my general orders to the T, because like brother Steve at the time, right? Sabir now, he would walk by me, and he knew me from that age, which was about 8, 9, 10, up until now. I just seen him a couple years ago when he came out here to Los Angeles. But in my teenage years, he will walk by me and literally throw about 4 or 5 punches before I even blinked. I was like, what's going on here? And then brother Jabbar would like come by and shoulder shrug me. But you know, these were the men I grew up around, you know. So I had no choice but to follow suit. The brothers, the FOI in the 80s, they used to run up the hill in what's called Kenneth Hahn Park. So they used to, every FOI class, they used to run up the hill all the way to the top of the hill, and then they would work out there. And these were my two karate instructors, Brother Jesse and Brother Steve in BKF at that time. So they would work out, and I was invited to go work out with them sometimes with the FOI. And, you know, during that time, there's a lot of turmoil between the FOI and LAPD. Like we lost Brother Oliver X. Beasley during that time because of the interactions between us. But the FOI was no joke. It's still no joke. But, you know, at that time, it was at its peak. So with these workouts, I remember being invited, and I wasn't ready for what they invited me for, brother. I was not ready, brother. I didn't make it up the hill. Like, I was like, I'll meet you guys there. I'll walk up. You know, they're used to this. I wasn't, brother. But yeah, that's the type of men that I grew up around. So you know, I have very high regard and high respect for these brothers.
Oh, praise
Yes, sir.
So now we've talked about your formation and your foundation as a man in Islam.
Yes, sir.
Now you mentioned your profession, and I think you know you do a wonderful work, and there are many in the community, and that's for the Muslims out there. The work is in the field, the work is in the street, the work is with the people, and when we build relationships with the people, we don't have to do a lot of explaining. They want to be what we have demonstrated in terms of being a brother and an upright individual in the community. Talk a little bit about your decision and your parents' reaction to you saying it's time to come back, your completion of your promise to Brother Wazir and to others, and really your fulfillment of the legacy that your father had laid down. How did you go in your early stages of development, some of your own personal things, and how you got to do what you do professionally and for the cause of your people?
Yes, sir. So where would you like me to start my transition back to the mosque?
You start. Yeah, I think that's a good space. I'm not sure. You know, we naturally find our own way. If you want to go into how you came back to the mosque or got active, but for many of us, we grow up around something and we never really fall all the way in, but we never really leave either. But you made a decision to commit. Talk a little bit about that, and then also talk a bit about your work.
Okay, yes, sir. So between my 20s, my father's transitioning, I went back to the streets, brother. I was just like, you know, I'm gonna try some other stuff. Let's see what's going on. But I never really fit in anywhere, because I always, like, you know, like the messenger teaches, you don't necessarily have to condemn a dirty glass of water. You just put a clear one next to it and a dirty one, it condemns itself.
Yes, sir.
And that was me. right? It was me trying to live as a Muslim outside of the reality of being a Muslim. So I was trying to be in the world, but I wasn't of that world. So I didn't fit in. You know, there's a lot of professional stuff that I did that I stuck out like a sore thumb. Like I just didn't fit in. Um, so that started working on me, brother. And then when I talked to Minister Wazir and my father's janazah, he said a lot of key things. He was very wise. He didn't have to say much. He just said very key things. You know, like, you know where you belong. Like, I don't know what you're doing, but, you know, fall back in. Praise be to Allah. So my journey back was just that. As a matter of fact, I want to also point out, brother Tino out here. He
Oh
does gang
man,
intervention work out here.
that's right.
Yeah, he invited me to a gang outreach that they were doing out here, a very big convention that they had. Well, not convention, but like gathering that they had at the community center here in South LA.
Yes,
And he said, "Why don't you come down?" You know, and I went, and it was Minister Tony Muhammad at the time speaking. And I hadn't just rejoined or came back into being a Muslim yet. And I heard the speech and I'm like, what am I doing, man? Like, I already gave the minister my word. Because, you know, and then I go, what am I doing here? Like, is it like, I don't want to be in the background because I hear all these people speaking and I was in the background. Like, there's still videos out there of me being in the background. It's like, I don't want to be a background. I want to be in the midst of everything that's going on because that's what my father told me to do and that's what I have to do. You know, that's my journey in Islam. And at that point, I made it a point to go back to the mosque that Monday. I then went back into orientation with Brother Merlin out in here at Mosque 27. And he knew Minister Wazir. He was very close to Minister Wazir. He was talked to about my father by Minister Wazir, someone he knew who my father was. And he was always like motivating me and like, okay, get your orientation done, get this done. And it went smoothly. And like Minister, like when I did my when I recited, it came back naturally. And they're like, okay, like you know, so but that journey back, and then when my mother saw me getting dressed with my suit and tie and going to the mosque, like I would have to say that I go through a different experience than most of our so-called Latinos go through, because to my mom it was like he's going back home, you know, whereas for other so-called Latinos it may be, where are you going? Why are you dressed like that? You know, and that's a conversation that we have to have in order to support our brothers in faith who go through that, because I know it's not easy for a lot of them. I have been blessed because of who my father was or is, you know, and I know a lot of our brothers are not given that from the get-go. But at the same time, I want to support the brotherhood as much as we can to understand that difference, you know, of how to stay steadfast in belief and not let men run you off, you know. And what I mean by that is like a lack of understanding sometimes,
That's right.
you
That's
know,
right.
and miscommunication sometimes. But yeah, brother, back to my journey back to Islam. It was just that for my mother. It was he's going back home and he's going to get himself straight. I never veered off the course too much like that. I could say, oh, I was on drugs and I was doing this. No, I never got to that point, but I was off track. So, you know, going back home was just that for my mother. It made her very proud. Like she would actually ask me, like when I wouldn't be at the mosque, like, are you going to FY class? Are you going to the mosque? I'm like, dang, you want me out the house or what? No, yeah, brother. So it was a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful thing, you know.
So let me ask you a question, and I do want to make space for any other questions that might come from our Facebook Live or YouTube or some of the others. But oftentimes there's a lack of real understanding or experience between the communities of the Spanish speaking people and those of our family here in North America. And
Yes, sir.
many times people have a misperception that things are all good because we have businesses or we have a community that's tight knit or whatnot. But there's problems in the Latino community that Islam addresses and
Mhm.
that you've been able to use professionally in your
Yes, sir.
work. How have you incorporated the lessons that you learned as an FOI, as a member of the Fruit of Islam, in your work in helping both Black and Brown in Los Angeles?
Yes, sir. So, getting into my profession, I'm what they considered here as a marriage and family therapist. So I do individual therapy as well as group therapy, as well as resources to the community, social work kind of stuff. Um, I run domestic violence groups on the weekend. I also am an advocate for so-called survivors of domestic violence, and um, I mean like victims of domestic violence, but they're not victims; they're survivors, is what I meant to say. Um, and me being a registered Muslim and a Muslim by nature, um, it helps me connect with the people from the point of I know who my people are. I know that the struggles that they go through are just worldly struggles that they could overcome. Um, and sometimes when my interactions with youth, they think I have like this like I don't know, out of this world kind of power or mystique that I could read their minds or something. And I'm like, no, sir, it's just our interactions of what you're giving me. You know what I mean? And what's really helped me from our um our teachings is the messenger's proper handling man of people, the proper handling of people, and how he talks about like all the cues he gives in that is basically therapy. Is like not negating people's feelings, like engaging people where they are, listening to how they interact. Um, all that stuff, I try to apply what I know from the teachings in my therapy. And what I mean by that is like there's no theory in the Nation of Islam on therapy,
Mm-hmm.
but the teaching itself is very therapeutic.
That's right.
It's self-empowering. It's coming to who you are. It's it's self-development. It is therapeutic. So I apply all that, brother, in my own way, in my own, insight to how I can do it. And I'm always seeking to improve, but I always fall back on Allah. Like whenever I think I'm gonna have a hard session,
Yes, sir.
I seek Allah.
You got to take
I'm
it to
like,
the
oh Allah,
God.
yeah, yes sir,
Real
yes
quick,
sir.
brother, we have a question from our sister editor at the Final Call newspaper, Sister Starla Muhammad. Brother Manuel, do you have plans to write a book or make a documentary on your family's rich and important history and contributions to Islam?
Praise be to Allah. I never considered it, brother, but I'll be open to it. You know, um,
And I think I think
yeah,
I think it would be a wonderful testimony. I don't. You were talking about journaling earlier, brother. So
yes sir,
definitely
yes sir.
about that, I think it's important. Just real quick, the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and your interaction, particularly on the West Coast and in areas we know that was, you know, Califas, Aztlan, that's the all of that was Mexico at one time, and will be again one day, inshallah. It will be in the
Inshallah.
hands of the original people there. But how do we see uh, the teachings from the angle? How do you see yourself in relationship to your community? And that'll be the last kind of question that we go into, and then we'll welcome our student minister, Brother Abel, back to close us out. But I think it's very important for people to hear how you see your Spanish speaking and indigenous family in the lens of the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and how you see yourself.
Um, for some clarity, brother, how do I
Sure.
see
How do
myself
you
in the
see
teachings?
the how has the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad affected how you identify yourself with your people who are called so-called Latinos?
It very in a really interesting way, brother, because like even Latino, like when we say so-called Latino in
Mm-hmm.
conversation, works against my psyche because that's not the way I was programmed to think. Even Mexican, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
knowing that we're the original people to the Western Hemisphere,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that our history on this planet Earth, it doesn't, like the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad has taught me that I don't necessarily have to like become like be on these confines of Mexicano, Puerto Riqueño. It's much broader.
That's right.
It's original. You know what I mean? Like you're indigenous. Like you belong to the land. Like this is yours. Like that teaching in itself has driven into me a very interesting like engram that whenever I hear like Latino, I'm like, no, what do you mean? White, white? Like, no, I'm not white. It's like whenever I hear Mexican, you know, and then we get into the teachings, like, okay, well, that Mexican's like more than likely he's from Spanish or European descent. He just landed in Mexico. Um, so it's like it gives you a different perspective of who you are. And that's in itself very fulfilling because the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad have not been disproven to this day.
That's right.
So the moment that they try to disprove it, please bring it.
That's right.
Like, you know, so it has given me a perspective of how I see myself and how I identify. You know, I do give like some kind of deference to my family history of where they originate from, but I know that's deeply rooted, much deeper than just that. So, you know, that I hope that answered the question, brother.
Beautifully. It was a beautiful point for your testimony tonight. And I want to just thank you and thank Almighty God Allah. Thank you, Student Minister Abel, for the opportunity for this wonderful interview. Let us hear from our beloved brother, Student Minister Abel.
Praise be to Allah.
I gotta thank Allah. Let me get rid of this view here. Can you all hear me okay?
We hear
Yes,
you.
sir.
The
Praise
echo
be
went
to
away.
Allah.
You're good now.
Good, good. I wanted to thank Allah for you, brother Manuel Ali Rashid.
Praise be to Allah.
Brother froze, but he'll be back shortly, unfrozen.
Yes, sir.
I know we
Oh, I
do
think
have
I'm
some
back here.
questions. You're back, brother minister.
Okay, yes, sir. I was just saying I thank Allah for you and your beautiful family and for your sacrifice and all that you all have done to help establish Islam in the West, and that your legacy from your wonderful father and mother, it is in good hands with you.
Praise be
And
to
we
Allah.
thank Allah for your willingness to share so much with us. I think we're going to have to do a part two, to be honest with you, because there's so much we didn't get into yet.
That's right.
Yes,
But
sir.
I think for what you shared already, and I thank you, brother student captain David, for the beautiful job you did in facilitating the conversation. And we want to thank everyone who joined us tonight, who tuned in, and who will share this in the future on Facebook or Twitter. Make sure you follow us at Nuestra NOI um, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And also, if we can, I'm going to put your information on the bottom of the screen here. If you want to contact Brother Manuel Ali Rashid Mohammed, you can contact him at the information provided on the bottom there via whether it's email or on, I believe it was the Facebook contact that we gave as
Yes,
well.
sir.
You can contact him there as well, because our brother not only has lived a life of history and significance, but he does a great work. And you know, so many of our people need a
Let's see if we can.
with the professional work that you do. So please don't be shy. Our brother is more than willing to help. as a
Yes,
Muslim,
sir.
That's right.
as a brother who cares and who's skilled in what he does. We want to make sure we put our people in the hands of our own who can assist them and not just medicate them, not just see them as a number, but sees them as what they are, which is a reflection of the divinity of the Creator. So we thank Allah for you. We thank Allah for all who tuned in. We're going to close out this evening. We're going to have you back on hopefully in the near future again, brother, so we can go further and deeper into so much that I know we didn't even get to touch on today. And it went by so fast. We're almost at
An hour and 15 minutes. Think of something to that effect. We must be cracking
and
atoms, brother. They keep
we're gonna
freezing
go
my
ahead and
brother.
close out. Yeah, it keeps booting me out for some reason. So we're gonna go ahead and close out. We want to invite everybody next Thursday. We'll be right back here with our Woman in Islam series, and we're staying on the West Coast
That's right.
with another sister who's a professional, who's just wonderful MGT. Sister Teresa is going to be on our program next Thursday on our Woman in Islam series. Keep one another in our prayers, keep the believers, keep our people in your prayers, and let us keep the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and his family, all of our executive council, their families, all of the believers, their families in our prayers. Remember to mask up, remember to keep safe, remember to take your vitamins, eat that bean soup, exercise, get some sunlight wherever you can, and let's do what we can to make sure that we survive the time that we're in. Love you all very much. May Allah bless you as we greet you this evening in the greeting words of peace. Assalamu alaikum. La paz sea
Walaikum salam.
Walaikum salam, sir.
Y que la paz esté con ustedes.
and peace be unto you. I saw it come
That's
back
right.
that time.
There you go. Go ahead.
May Allah bless you and thank you all again. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, sir.